Shalom. Welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon, and I'd like to welcome a new co-host to the Jewish View, Mr. Marc Gronich. Marc, welcome to the Jewish View.
Well, I'm glad to be here. Thanks.
Marc's regular job is the legislative coordinator for Assemblyman Joel Miller, but on the side, he, like I say, he's his co-host. I don't know which is a bigger job, but this will get him fame and glory throughout the world. In any case, Marc, you know, we always on the Jewish View love talking about a common issue in the news concerning the Jewish people, and you say you have something very, very special that is really in the headlines nowadays concerning the Jewish people.
Yeah, this issue concerns the Swiss banks and the amount of money that the Swiss banks hoarded during the Holocaust, and it seems like every politician now is jumping on the bandwagon, but the person who really led this charge has been United States Senator Alphonse D'Amato. And D'Amato has held hearings, and he's been investigating this and pursuing this, and the Swiss banks have said, you know, we can't trace it because it's only numbers, it's not names of people.
Marc, if we can go back to the
Sure.
beginning over here and just fill in for myself also. It's 50 years since World War II. And talking what happened all of a sudden, in a way it is all of a sudden, after 50 years, all of a sudden they discovered there's, like you say, there's so much money from the Holocaust survivors.
Well, it's not all of a sudden. I mean, these people have been asking the Swiss banks quietly, people from the Holocaust, survivors of the Holocaust, children of the Holocaust whose parents and relatives did not survive. They always knew that their relatives put money in the Swiss banks, but during the Holocaust, the Nazis destroyed the numbers, the codes, so that, you know, because it's apparently names were not used for these Swiss banks. I don't have a Swiss bank account, so I don't really know for a fact. But this is really the way the banks.
To trace them,
so supposedly it's impossible to trace it. Lo and behold, United States Senator Al D'Amato got wind of this, and he said, I will look into this for you, as chairman of the Senate Banking Committee. And he looked into this and found out that the Swiss banks can trace them, can trace these numbers to names. They were very reluctant. They didn't want to. There are basically three banks that are hoarding the most money, and these three Swiss banks are all New York State chartered banks, coincidentally.
So what are the Swiss, so they're just adamant they just don't want to return the money, or they don't want to give even over the names? They're not going to tell over anything.
They don't want to give anything back. The Jewish groups estimate it could be $7 billion that these Swiss, if you had $7 billion, you wouldn't want to give it up either.
Well, I mean, but now, there has to be some right and some cause to it. I mean, banks just don't say, you know, obviously there's people have millions of dollars in the banks.
Billions.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying that even if people do, they just don't say we don't want to give it back.
But they're willing to give back 1% as a good faith. That is $71 million. I mean, that's, for you and me, that's an extraordinary amount of money. Yeah. But that's only 1% of what's being claimed here. It's not even close. They're not even in the ballpark. So a lot of the legislators, key legislators, top legislators in both New York City and the federal government, such as Al D'Amato, and in the state government, such as Governor Pataki, have been getting involved in this issue. People who can do something. In New York City, the city council passed a measure that was spearheaded by the city council president, Peter Vallone, that said New York City will be barred, not be permitted to make any deposit or any investments that have to deal with these three banks. These three banks are called Credit Suisse, Swiss Bank Corp, and the Union Bank of Switzerland. And they are the ones who, you know, the Nazis took gold from people, from the teeth of the Jews, and they put this gold in the bank. This gold is worth a lot of money now. And it's so awful to think of. It's not just gold jewelry. It's not just money and dollars and paper money and coins. It's the gold from the teeth. I mean, this is incredible.
Well, but that's different. Then that's not that's collective money. I mean, no one can say that the relatives' gold is there. So, I mean, how would they even divide that up, or who do they want to?
They're trying to make an account. They're trying to set up some sort of general fund, and then and when you make a claim, it's sort of, you know, I guess the way the courts do it when you have a class action lawsuit. But they're trying to create a fund and somehow divvy it up. So some people will get most of what they feel they're owed. I mean, you know, some people will get less than, you know, will get more than what they're owed, and you know, it's close. I mean, it'll be an interesting situation to see how this.
And they are pressuring him from the.
They're pressuring from all sides. Governor Pataki recently dispatched state banks superintendent Neil Levin to go to Switzerland and to look into this personally. And Neil Levin, who's Jewish, you know, had personal stake in this also, and he really felt that there was a need, and you know, it's still yet to be determined what his what he had found out from the Swiss.
Well, I guess I don't know how much pressure that they obviously can put on. They could put pressure on, but like you say, to give up $7 billion would have to be totally extreme.
Well, like I said, for you and me, this is a large amount of money. For the Swiss, this is a drop in the bucket.
What's $7 billion?
$7 billion is a drop in the bucket. They have hundreds of billions of dollars in their banks. They have trillions. I mean, it's a lot of money that they have in their banks. And to think that $7 billion won't even bankrupt, I mean, it's not going to bankrupt them. It's not going to harm them. It's not going to. They'll make it up in interest in the next month on some, you know, on all the other accounts they have. The Swiss banks do an extraordinary amount of money, numbers that you and I couldn't fathom, and the $7 billion is, you know, a drop in the bucket for them. So, but this is, and Assembly Speaker Sheldon Silver is holding hearings, you know, about this as well. So he's jumping on the bandwagon, but there's no legislation that's coming out from the Assembly that would bar New York State from investing in the Swiss banks or having any dealings with the Swiss banks. There's such as, you know, what New York City did. The state is not doing anything about that. The Assembly Banks Committee chair is Aurelia Green from the Bronx, but she's, you know, been virtually silent on this. Assembly Speaker Shelley Silver, Dov Hikind, who's Assemblyman from Brooklyn, and other Sam Coleman, Assemblyman from Rockland County. Those are the ones who have been really spearheading this in the Assembly, but they have not been doing anything substantial. They've been, when I say spearheading, it's more grandstanding, I guess, is one way of putting it.
Well, what can they do really from
like
the
I
part
said,
of the Assembly?
they could do like New York City did.
Would that harm it? That would.
It would send a
directly-
strong message. It's an embargo. It's sending, you know, a strong message. It's sort of the way New York State reacted with South Africa when they still had apartheid. You know, and we wanted to pull our investments out of banks that did business with South Africa or any company that did business with South Africa. And when South Africa's policy changed, we kept our investments in. So, but this is a very emotional issue, and the Swiss are already conceding. Yes, all right, 71 million is a number that we can, but 7 billion is what the Jewish groups are saying. So I presume it's going to be somewhere closer to the 7 billion than the 71
you
million.
think they'll give in? That's what you perceive?
Absolutely, absolutely. There's no question they have to give in, and Senator D'Amato is relentless in his pursuit to make them give in. Yeah.
It's interesting because of, you know, I'm sure as you grew up that we always heard, oh, well, the Swiss were always neutral in the World War II, and it sounds nice and it's beautiful, but, you know, that's what I say at the beginning, after 50 years, you know, the secrets come out that really they weren't at all neutral.
Well, sure, they were neutral. They took money from everyone.
Yeah.
You know, they didn't care who they, you know, they funneled the money from Mussolini to Hitler, and it went through the Swiss banks. Anytime one faction had dealings with another faction in the world at that time, the money went through the Swiss banks. So they were, in essence, neutral because they weren't going to bar anyone or prevent anyone from doing business with them. That's why they were neutral.
The German
cause, helped the German cause. It helped the Italian, the fascists, and it helped everyone. But in essence, it really harmed the Jewish people.
They took their money. They did, but they didn't, like they funneled it the other way. I mean, they knew that, of course, this was ill-gotten gain, so to speak. I mean, it's one thing that you don't agree with another country or something in a war, but obviously taking, like you say, golden teeth from victims is obviously a little bit more, you know, lower in an ebb of taking money than, you know, you don't like the country's policies. There's like, say, South Africa, you don't like their policies. All right, you take their money, but it's not gold out of people's teeth. But, you know, you get money, you know, like I say. It's
ill-gotten gain. and the Swiss just had a blind eye, and they said, "This is, we'll save, we'll put this in this account for you," and they just, now it's up to so the survivors, the children of the survivors who are elderly, who are not going to benefit much from this money, but the next generation after them probably benefit, and the generations after that. And maybe this will be a new spirit, a new light.
Will they give any money like this to causes they're saying, or like to Israel? I mean, there must be money that there not must be any claimants.
No,
some families are just so wiped out, like for example in Poland.
Yeah, it'll most likely go. I haven't seen any in the reports I've been reading, in the background material that I've been researching. I haven't seen anyone say that it would go to a group or a cause or anything like that. It would mainly go for families, such as in a class action suit.
Yeah, well, obviously there's not going to be totally accountable for it. That's what I'm saying, because, I mean, just whole families, you say, all right, half the families wiped out. Certain families were just totally wiped out and probably didn't even know about it, or there's little kids. Well, it's unfortunate.
And as you know, there are members in the state legislature who are Holocaust survivors. Assemblyman Sam Coleman from Rockland is one of them.
Really, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And Dov Hiken's family, they were survivors from the Holocaust. So it's really a gut-wrenching situation. Hits home in the legislature.
In New York especially.
Yeah.
So many people that they're representing. It's unfortunate that they also say about France now that, I don't know, again, it comes out 50 years later, so unfortunate, because we could talk about that they have so many of these paintings.
Yeah.
Of course, that the Jewish people, I mean, not to say that they were all well off, but there were a lot that had just beautiful artifacts, and Germans took them, and then in the meantime, France took them back. But again, no one ever gave it back to the Jewish people, so you're still finding that out also of how much wealth really was taken from the Jewish people. And it's one thing, it was destroyed, it was part of the war. War is war, you can count it, but if there's a legitimate government just saying, well, we know it's Jewish money and we're putting it in our vaults and we're not going to let anybody have it, I mean, that's, I think there has to be some accounting for that.
And it's gained in value all these years.
Yeah.
All that,
How much compared to 50 years ago? What the price of
gold,
like
nothing.
you're saying?
Gold was worth, it was very inexpensive back then, and now it's just mind-boggling how much more it's worth.
Yeah. Well, hopefully these things come out over here in the light of investigation. So at least, it's so late because they deal with Nazi war criminals on the same tone also. I mean, here again, I just keep on bringing up the subject, 50 years, justice. They're taking a 75, 80-year-old man to, well, it's
but
good that
did you hear about what happened in Canada?
What happened now?
They're working they're living in Canada. The Nazis they found a whole slew of Nazis now. Yeah,
Really?
60 Minutes uncovered this. Can we say 60 Minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, we don't have to give rights
Our
away.
competition.
It's our competition. But they uncovered this part of Canada where the Nazis have fled, and the Canadian government was harboring them and never told anyone.
In a small community,
Yeah,
they
and they
just
knew
kept
it
them
was
together.
in the central, the western part of Canada.
No one would notice them or something, put them in a corner.
But still, the Canadians knew that they were there,
Yeah.
and they just didn't, on their own recognizance, they didn't say anything. So, I mean, the Nazis are not just in Argentina, and they're just not in South America. They're all over. I remember, if I can stay on this one,
Hey, go ahead.
I remember one time in 1978, one of the first years I was up here in Albany, and I was up at SUNY, and we had a bus ride up to Whitehall, New York in Washington County. It was led by Rabbi Silton from Temple Israel.
Mm.
There was a gentleman up there, Phyllis Hosners, never forget his name. Rabbi Silton found that he was a Nazi war criminal being harbored and living a comfortable life in Whitehall. And we took a bus ride, 3 buses of SUNY students and activists from there, and we marched with, coughing and singing the Hatikvah, and we were up there marching, and he, of course, he heard we were coming, and he's fled, and we don't think he's living there anymore. But we drove him out, and we made our point. And even so close to Albany, Phyllis Hosners was living in Whitehall. I'll never forget that. As 20 years ago.
just again, it's unfortunate. It's just that the Jewish people were such victims, and it, you know, right? You say one country, but again, your friends. It hurts especially where, at least you know you have enemies, but then consoling you have friends. But when your friends, it's like Swiss or something, you think they're your friends, or the Americans, like you say, are Canadians. You know, all the good Canadians, and then they harbor war criminals that they know hurt people and are really literally the worst criminals in the world. I mean, you wouldn't want to murder someone who's out on parole and they give a hoo-ha when someone moves in next to you, you know, or a rapist, they get so upset that someone moves in your neighborhood. Here, people kill hundreds of people, 1,000 people, and they're just living, you know, and no one cares less. If they're secretly, it's one thing, who's supposed to know? You know, there's always somebody who sneaks in, but they give them sanction. It's really a tremendous thing. I think it's a shame on the society. And you know, and they talk about America, how they, or the Western countries, how they didn't deal with the Holocaust during the World War II. There's so many books written about that nowadays. Again, it took years to get that out, of how they really did know about it, and the Holocaust Museum documents it clearly. Yeah, but again, so that's even one issue. And then afterwards, that even though you knew the crimes, right, there's nothing to hide because everybody knows, you know, 6 million Jews died, so that you can't even think that people don't know, even though the government probably did know, and there's documentation for that. And you'll say, okay, so what? You know, that's their big attitude over here, you know, keep the money, and so we'll keep their money and leave the Nazis do what they want. Now, I really think that there has to be a moral accounting on the part of the Western nations. There's books written about them, but really no one has really taken anybody to task for doing that to account.
Yeah, absolutely. They need to. There has to be a moral accountability to this. But just to segue into what the state is doing, in the State Museum, there's a Holocaust exhibit. You mentioned the Holocaust Museum in Washington, but in New York, over 10 years ago, we set up, as part of the State Museum, a Holocaust exhibit. And I remember being there with former Senate Minority Leader Manfred Orenstein and Franz Leichter, who's still in the Senate now. He's from they're both from Manhattan, and they really pushed to get this money for the museum, and it hasn't been kept up. And now the governor is putting money in, and that's part of the renovation of the State Museum. Will be renovation by the year, you know, somewhere between now and the year 2000, 2002. But, you know, that's not too far away, you know. Within the next 4 or 5 years, we're going to be seeing an expanded part of that Holocaust exhibit.
Really? I didn't know money went for
that. That just was announced recently.
All right, so that's good.
And a lot of people should go see it because they don't realize Oswego was an internment camp up in the north, you know, on Lake Ontario, up in the northern parts of New York State. They learn a lot about New York's role in the Holocaust, and when people came over on the boat, everyone thinks Ellis Island, but Oswego was a real part of it and an important part, and that's a display there. Part of the display is to tell you about Oswego and the internment camp there.
Yeah. Well, Lisa, you're right that New York State has done well. Again, New York State, again, credit to these senators that, you know, push for it. I guess if you can't speak up for yourself, like the Pirkei Avos says, ethics of your fathers. If you don't stick up for yourself, who's going to stick up for you? You know, you're not going to wait for anybody else to be concerned. And like you say, even the legislators nowadays, that they have to, or the Jewish people on their own representatives have to get pressure and saying, hey, you know, New York State is so central to American economy, to the world economy, and the Jewish people are so central of a role here that there is that political power to make some account to somewhere.
And there's the old saying, you know, if you just sit back and you say, and they're attacking your neighbor, and you're like, well, all right, it's just the neighbor, and then and they're gone, and then they attack the other neighbor, and you're sitting back and you're saying, well, you know, who's going to protect me? And finally, you know, you're the last one, and they're coming to attack you, and you're looking around, who's going to help me? And there's no one around. I mean, we all have to sort of also help each other.
To work together on this. I think it's important. I mean, the role of New York State shouldn't be underestimated. I know if we bring in the Lubavitcher Rebbe, you know, that, and the previous Rebbe actually, of course, set up world headquarters in Brooklyn, part of the state. And the Rebbe once said that New York State is, well, the central part of the United States. It may not be, I know, in population or California, but still there's other things besides population, just in economics and just essential, you'd say Wall Street, I mean, just the money part, you say, or Washington, D.C. is the capital, but really it's the #1 city is New York City. And he even actually wanted you to know that Albany, he said, that is the capital of New York State. So it's like the major point here in the small Albany. I don't know how people think it's small or not, but really it's according to Rebbe even that there was a major point of Albany is the center of New York State, with New York State's the center of the country, and the United States is the center of really the #1 superpower in the whole world. So we do have some power, maybe in a small way, but I mean, in a very centralized way here.
People don't understand. New York State has the second largest militia outside of the United States government. I mean, we have an air force. We have more ships than any of Navy. I mean, most people don't realize that. We have a division of military and naval affairs in the state, and people it's what are they going to be? A few volunteers here and there. They're going to walk around with bayonets. No, it's a big operation. We have in the Bronx. They have the Maritime Academy and Maritime College, and there it's based all the ships for our Navy, for New York's Navy. And we also have a lot of aircraft that we have here locally here in Latham, a lot of in Schenectady at the Stratton Air Base. And the Air National Guard is we're going all over the world. Every time there's a relief mission. I went with a relief mission down to Jamaica one time.
Really?
Yeah, it was really a lot of fun.
Because you were a reporter, not you were a soldier.
But no, because I was a reporter. But it was like C-130. I mean, we have a lot of
major planes
here. We're not just a rinky-dink, wind them up with a rubber band type, operation. It's really quite impressive, and people don't realize the stature that New York really holds, and we've always had a huge military. If you go to the state capitol, you'll see the flag room. You'll learn all about the history. You go to Gettysburg, you'll see 1 out of every 12 tombstones, I think, is a New Yorker.
Really?
Oh, it's incredible how many New Yorkers lost their lives in Gettysburg. And for years, we've always had a large presence militarily. So it's not just economically. We're a huge presence economically. Most people don't realize our #1 industry, though, is agriculture. And our #1 commodity is dairy in the state. Wall Street and that sort of stuff is our 4th largest industry. It's our so as large as Wall Street is, tourism is larger. Agriculture is even larger than that. It's a phenomenal state that we're in right now, and I'm not even running for an office.
Yeah.
But this is quite a we do have a lot to say on this issue of the Holocaust, of the Nazis, of what needs to be, and we shouldn't be taken lightly.
Well, I think that's the legislatures, and you were now that we have not only can I say a co-host, but we have our man on the eye of the legislature, so we have our own personal reporter in there to tell us about the Jewish happenings. There are other Jewish things that do come up in the legislature.
Absolutely.
We only have a few minutes left. Maybe we'll have to devote other shows to it.
Yeah, just brief, and I'll bring it on. There are basically only 10 bills right now that have been sponsored or introduced in the Assembly and the Senate, whether it's dealing with Israel or it's dealing with kosher laws or it's dealing with any type of Judaism of Judaic nature. There's only 10 bills right now, and there have been, I think, about 5,000 already. 5,000
really?
Bills that have been introduced already. So,
It's very small.
But even the small number, we don't have that much time on the show. So maybe the small number we'll be able to talk about them.
Yeah.
So I'll bring in the information, and we'll talk about that in future shows. And we'll
keep our eye on the Capitol. The Jewish eye. We'll have to call it the Jewish view. The Jewish eye on the Capitol. Can make it a state-run show over here. That's to expand ourselves from the Capital District into the New York State, the Jewish, our Jewish eye and what's happening in your representatives in New York State. Well, there is so much Jewish representative, but again, of course, they have a job for all New York State, of course, to say the least. They're not just there representing the Jewish people, but certain things come up, and it's important that Jewish people feel that they have. That they're taken care of, because going back to World War II, like Dad, we know what it means that if you don't have a friend in the government, that's what happened. They didn't really care that much of the Jewish people, whatever, regardless. And the Jewish people didn't speak up then. And we all know history over here. That's what happened. And obviously, I don't know if anything's that important like that, the Holocaust happening, but there are Jewish interests. It's important for the Jewish people.
There are some people arguing about the budget who make it seem as though it's as large as the Holocaust, but it isn't, you know, but they make it seem like the world is going to come to an end if we don't give funding for this group and that group and the other group, and you know, we will survive, you know.
Well, every group, of course, wants to pull for their own.
Everyone. You wouldn't believe the amount of the groups that come in the lobby. Tuesdays, you can't get an elevator in the legislative office building.
Tuesday's the day. We'll have to prevent ourselves from going there. Well, we go there many times to the assembly. Of course, I personally have been invited to give invocations,
yes,
as you know, many times.
I heard the one you gave in Tu B'Shvat. It was wonderful.
Yeah. Well, you know, we talk about the trees. There are different times of the year. You know, they, like you say, it's only a few days a week where you can get in, you know, that they're in a session, and then it's really in the first half of the year for the most part until they, like you say, finally the budget does get around to being passed, and then that's really the highlights. Well, it's different times, so we go there, and, you know, there's a lot of assembly people with Jewish interest and other even non-Jewish assembly people or senators that care because they have a lot of Jewish constituents and
constituents,
and you know, people are, they want to see what's happening with the Jewish people. I think there's always the Jewish people, you know, people have a little bit of a looking up to them, saying, you know, I don't see the moral ground of what the Jewish people could lead us. You know, if Jewish people are, you know, in the forefront of many things, either it's Israel, and sometimes they're followers. You know, they say, well, whatever America likes, we'll take that also. I think people have a little bit of a keen sense where, you know, well, there's the Jewish people are, somebody special, somebody chosen, not in a bad way, derogatory sense, but something where they are the light of the world and things like that. And I think people are interested in seeing what they're up to and what they're doing. Hopefully they are a proper people and not just following along with everybody else. But well, I just want to thank Mark for our first show. We'd say the inaugural show, Charters show, for the new co-host with Marc Gronich. And you know, it's good that first, I think your expertise of knowing about as a reporter, and so you're still a little reporter. We're not going to take that away, former reporter, but now working for the assembly. But that puts the two together. You're like a reporter for the assembly, especially for the Jewish few here. And no, I'm sure no Jewish actions or no Jewish legislations will go by your eyes. Absolutely. And of course, you'll report it back to us. And hopefully we have some very good and interesting shows, and everybody enjoys it and gets educated by them. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.